Hello, my friends, and welcome to another podcast. I've lost track now which episode this is. I believe this is episode 8. But today we're having quite an interesting discussion as we are talking about the soundtrack and the music for the upcoming Amazon Lord of the Rings show. But as always, we have lots of guests and a special guest as well in today's video and podcast. But firstly, starting off with Chen. Hello, my friend.
Hi.
Also, I'm Zobud, aka Enzo.
Hello.
We've got the lovely Nikki as always.
Megavan and Melanin.
And to probably counter Elvish, we have also our special guest, voice of Geekdom, also known as Dan.
Hello there.
Oh no!
Great to be on with you.
Thank you. We were looking for the Elvish. I'm joking. It's quite hard to do Elvish like that. But of course, voice of Geekdom is another YouTuber. Do you want to plug yourself quickly?
Yeah, sure. I'm a Lord of the Rings YouTuber. Predominantly, I focus on the Silmarillion content, actually. So I've been going through the Silmarillion book chapter by chapter and breaking down sort of summaries of each chapter and doing some cool little stuff with some guests that I have on, where I'm having other content creators and people in the fandom come on and provide voice work for different bits of dialogue in the book. We've actually got Nikki coming up in a few weeks' time voicing Melian the Maya, which will be fun.
Yeah, we do. Awesome.
Wow.
So there's something to look forward to. And I also podcast as well. I've had Harry on in the past, so that was good fun. We had a good discussion with the panel. So I'm starting to podcast more recently, and I want to do more of those. But yeah, so that's me.
Great, and all his links will be in the description below: Instagram, Twitter, and of course YouTube. But now let's get right into the discussion. And of course, I'm not sure if the viewers at home know, but Hen here, he loves this topic, so I am sorry if he goes into a lot of detail, but of course we'll try to keep it as short as possible. But let's get right into it. So firstly, starting off with, of course, when we think of soundtracks and music from the Lord of the Rings, the first person that comes to mind is of course Howard Shore, no matter what. And voice of Geekdom, as you are the special guest for today's podcast, just give me your opinions on Howard Shore, and would you like to see him back for the show, being asked back?
Absolutely, yes. Like that, a resounding yes. I mean, I love the Lord of the Rings movies. I have my criticisms of them at times as somebody who read the books very young and came to the books first. But the one element of the movies that I will never ever hear a bad word said about is the soundtracks, which are amazing. And they simply sell the world of Tolkien so well. I think what you can say about Howard Shore is how engaged he was with the source material, because you get the impression that he was really inspired by the complexity and the intricacy of Tolkien's world, and that inspired his kind of. We were talking just before we started recording about the the musical language that he employs, and sort of different palettes for different settings, and how everything is so interwoven. And you can really tell how he engaged with the world in terms of how he introduced that kind of that feeling of the music being interwoven as well, if that makes sense. So yes, I think in a show you have a different you will have a different structure to that interwovenness of musical language, because it's a long running serial thing. But we'll get into that a little bit.
Yeah.
I think.
And what I especially liked about that, what you mentioned, was that he had a love for this source material, and we knew he was on the production for quite a while. And before we move on to the conversation, I really apologize. Our lovely Tolkien tuber is also here for the podcast. I'm sorry, my friend.
Yeah, well, it's great to be here, but I mean, I didn't need the introduction. They all know me.
Oh, sorry. I'm really...
Nah, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Okay, but back to the main point now. So what I really like that Dan said was that, in fact, that we know that Howard Shore was on the production of the Lord of the Rings for quite a while, and this is going into Hen territory, where we know that Amazon have not currently contacted Howard Shore, but for the Lord, and they're currently on to episode 3, episode 4 of filming. But for the Lord of the Rings, he was on there for quite a while, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. He was contacted during pre-production, I think. I actually read on it shortly prior to this that he came to the set in early, like just before they started shooting in 1999, and he wrote a version of the Shire theme, not quite a finished theme, but a version of it before they even started shooting. But that's very, very unusual for a composer, for a movie composer. Typically in movies, the composer isn't someone that you contact or bring into the process until the thing is completely shot, because he has to compose to the footage. And like, I think like Maurice Jarre in his works with David Lean would have only a couple of weeks to work on each score. And the same like John Williams composes for, I think, 8 weeks, 10 weeks maybe for a really, you know, really big project like a Star Wars movie, maybe 10, 12 weeks. That's the extent of their involvement. And so, yeah, the show could still contact Howard Shore. It's very possible that they're just waiting for the thing to be shot.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think we have to worry too much yet. And Enzo, I know I've asked Dan this, but would you want Amazon to contact Shore?
Well, that's a hard question, because on the one hand, the soundtrack of The Lord of the Rings is one of the best scores in the history of cinema. There is no debate about it. But on the other hand, bringing Howard Shore means that we are definitely delving into the continuity, and we are embracing the fact that this is a prequel. It's no more an original thing. And I'm not sure if Howard Shore can renew himself enough to give a new artistic, to give a new feel to this project. So I'm a bit hesitating.
Well, we've known, I'm sure Hen can quote me exactly on the points, but we know there's going to be quite a bit of continuity with the films and the show. But with that, I know we're going to go on later about continuity, but Nikki, would you like to see continuity between, or music-wise and soundtrack-wise, between the show and the Lord of the Rings?
Well, I reckon, of course, Howard Shore is a musical genius. What he makes is amazing, but there are many incredible composers out there, many young ones that are up and rising as well, that we haven't even discovered yet. So I reckon they could potentially come up, go up to Howard Shore and ask him for permission to use some of the material, like as in to make something similar that resembles, but that they might use a different composer altogether. I mean, he created the world that is Lord of the Rings in music. So I'm not opposed to them continuing on that and using Howard Shore as a composer, but I also think it would be cool and a good idea to maybe have a collaboration between him and maybe another composer, so we get something that's new and fresh and more TV friendly, sort of, because in TV there you have to think about the fact that there's going to be more episodes, they're going to be long, there's going to be a lot of different stuff happening, and it's going to be many seasons, so you kind of need to accommodate that as well.
Exactly, and interesting, maybe more of a consulting basis would be enough for sure. But I want to quickly take the conversation back a bit. So, Dan, do you have anything to say to what Enzo said?
Yes, I think regarding continuity, continuity with the film franchise, that is. I think that ship has already sold, hasn't it? By virtue of the fact that we're filming in New Zealand again. I think we should expect a certain amount of visual continuity for that fact alone. By all means, it appears that they are contracting Weta for some of their work as well. So I think we should expect a certain amount of continuity with the films, and I think it makes marketing sense as well. So as far as the music, I wouldn't necessarily look at that as being a drawback to using Shore again. I'd see that as a plus point, as a point in his favor.
Yeah, that is quite interesting. Ken, do you have any like other examples of when we've seen potential continuity between the show and Lord of the Rings?
It's just, the filming in New Zealand, the map that Amazon has put out maintains one very kind of strange element of the maps that were used in the movies, in that the mountains of the east are quite close to Misty Mountains. They're not far from Mordor, which is not usual in maps of Middle-earth. It was done for movies, and it's done again for the show, so that's a good indication. And also we have John Howe, who's the show's conceptual designer, as he was on the movies as well, who said that it will be a continuation, twice in fact. And so has Jackson said, because he had been in contact with the showrunners, he got the idea from them that they want to keep the design. So naturally, I would assume it's not conclusive by any means, but it's something. It does point towards the idea of an aesthetic continuity.
Indeed, and it will depend. And I know Enzo, you said like that if you would want to see continuity with it or not. But do you have any final thoughts on that, Enzo?
No, I gave my point.
Fair enough. Yeah, go on, don't say anything.
No.
Cool. And again, I have the forgotten soldier of today's podcast, Mr. Tolkien Tube. Go away, sir.
Yeah, well, just on the topic of there being similarity between the TV show and the movies, as Hin said, Weta has been contacted, or at least we think it has been. They are filming in New Zealand. Tom Shippey was hired, and he may still be active in the show. We don't know. And John Howe has come back as well. So we're definitely going to see some continuity between the series. And even if the composer, sorry, his name escapes me right now, but if the composer that composed The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit doesn't come back, we will probably hear a similar kind of music, because it's really iconic what the last two trilogies made, and I don't think they'd just throw all of that stuff away.
Yeah, interesting, because could Amazon use Howard Shore's work without having him even on the project? That's of course probably down to more legal stuff anyways, but I think one thing that you did mention is about seeing if there was continuity, what things can they actually use, because the Second Age is over 3,300 years in length, and of course you have the Third Age as well. There's thousands and thousands of years of difference between the Second Age and Third Age. So what continuity can we actually have? Of course we have characters like Elrond, Galadriel, but even places, there's, for example, I know there's one with Lothlorien, but Nikki, any places that you think we could see we have continuity which can also relate to their musical theme in the Lord of the Rings as well?
Well, of course, you can't really use any of the Hobbit stuff because it's hobbits, and we're definitely, I'm gonna say definitely not gonna say see any hobbits in this show. I believe, well, honestly, I really loved both the Lothlorien and the Rivendell soundtracks, and I also enjoyed, I think it's called something of Starlight. It's
Feast of Starlight.
Yes, it's the theme music of Toriel. Yes, I know she's not very much approved here, but I think that the music is beautiful and it's elvish and it's perfect, and I would like to see that. And also the Khazad-dûm, like the Dwarven themes, I think they are really, really well made.
The Toriel one, it's actually the Toriel Kili love theme, the thing is.
Yeah.
So that's I don't think we'll see that. But,
no, but I mean, like that sort of sound, not necessarily that particular theme, but that sort of sound, because it represents something bigger than life. It represents something elvish. Like, to me, that's what it is.
Yeah, it's
So,
lovely.
yeah.
It's very lyrical type of writing. Beautiful, yeah.
Yeah.
And another theme, of course, that we mentioned earlier, I think before we started recording, was the Dwarven theme, and I'm sure, Ken, you can give me the more specific ones, because I'm sure you have them down.
Yeah, that's the tricky thing. The question is what we have Moria, yeah? That's probably the main, if not the only, Dwarven nation that we will be dealing with. Moria and the dwarves in general, they had a lot of themes to them. The question is, which one do you use? Which one is appropriate? There is a magnificent, beautiful theme for Dweredelf, which is heard when you first enter the 21st Hall of Moria, I think it is. And Gandalf lights it with his staff, and it's a glorious
Yeah, that's gorgeous.
music. But it is quite melancholy, because it is the ruined grandeur of the dwarves, Howard called it. And so maybe that one, it could
But
be.
they're not going to use the whole thing. Like, think about it like, my partner is the composer, and I've spoken to him a lot about this. You take certain parts of it. So you don't take the whole song. You take maybe like, there is like 4 or 5 different notes that you play, and then you can play them melancholy, or you can replay them in a different tune. But it's still the same song. You're just playing it with different speeds, different backgrounds, different instruments, and it generates this feeling of everything coming together, because you recognize that particular set, that particular melody. Sorry.
Was it like in the Lord of the Rings where Boromir was
yeah.
speaking at the White Council, and you heard that's the first time we hear the Gondor theme, but we didn't actually hear the full Gondor theme until like in movie 2 or movie 3. So is that kind of what you're trying to say?
That's kind of that's
Except you use it a lot more during TV than you would during a movie. Like, you'll use it in a movie as well, but in TV, I think we'll see it more often.
I really agree. I'm sorry, go ahead.
There are other Dwarven themes that could be applicable. There's a wonderful, much more upbeat kind of theme for the Dwarf Lords, which Howard composed but didn't have the opportunity to use much in The Hobbit, because it ended up being kind of replaced by other themes. There's little bits of it. It's wonderful and kind of uplifting, and that would work really, really well for the dwarves of the Second Age as well. So there are multiple choices.
And as far as dwarves are concerned, there's also the Lonely Mountain / Lake Town songs, which are definitely a bit more upbeat than Moria. Personally, I think they're less likely to be included, but it's something else that we may see.
Yeah, specific to those cultures, though. The specific, like, there's an Erebor theme, which is basically just 3 horn calls, but it's very solemn, and it's specific to Erebor.
Yeah.
So, like the shape of the mountain, but in music. And so, yeah, that doesn't really
Yeah, and there's another one. I'm not quite sure where it is in the movie, but there is sort of a more upbeat one. I think it's when the dwarves sort of arrive either at Lake Town or at Moria, and it's sort of like a triumphant dwarf theme. But again, that's sort of the iconic Erebor theme, so it would be harder for them to use that rather than Khazad-dûm, especially because we definitely aren't going to see Erebor, whereas we probably will see Moria. I'd be very surprised if we didn't.
Absolutely.
And Dan, would you like to see continuity with some Dwarven themes? What type of Dwarven themes from the movies would you like to see? For example, we might be seeing Na'vi the dwarf, or maybe whichever Durin it is. I'm not even sure. Durin the third, I think. But anyways,
I think it's the third, yeah.
Yeah. So what themes would you like to see for dwarf wise?
I would just comment on the way that the structure might work, really, because we're talking about themes mostly in terms of different locations in the world, and that's obviously a good way of thinking about the movies, because that seems to be how they were structured. But in my opening comments, I sort of talked about how the serialized format might change the structure a little bit, and you mentioned Na'vi. Let's have a theme for him, you know, rather than a theme for Moria, if that makes sense. Let's have a theme for Durin. So I could see them kind of working it slightly differently, where the characters are more the underpinnings of the musical language that they're employing.
Yes.
That brings up a whole point, which is what themes for places or for cultures can you then apply to characters? Because that's something that you do in scoring, because themes in music don't mean things in the same way that words do. The meaning is associative, and usually, like, I don't know, the Lothlorien theme is also kind of for Galadriel. It's kind of the Galadriel theme, because that's just the nature of how music works. It's just like in Wagner, the theme for Valhalla is also the theme for Odin. They're the same. So that sort of thing. The theme
It's a
for
bit
the Empire
symbolic.
the theme for the Empire is also the theme for Darth Vader. You know, it's that sort of thing. And so you could use technically like the Dwarven theme or the House of Durin theme as well for like Durin the Third. You could do that sort of thing. The question is, how much would, say, Howard Shore prefer to do that as opposed to writing a new theme for some of these characters? Would he take the Rivendell theme, for instance, and use it for Elrond before the Riven is the Rivendell? Could be, I don't know. It's a good question, though.
And also, Enzo, I know that you've expressed in previous podcasts that one of you think the main character would be potentially Gil-galad, and one place that we haven't really seen in the movies really was Linden. I know we saw seeing a bit of Mithlond, but not specifically Linden. Do you think Howard Shore, or not Howard Shore, whoever the composer is, should create a new final theme for Linden, or maybe use some previous Elvish themes?
On this one, I'm still split. I would go against my word earlier and say that the Rivendell theme could go very well with Mithlond. The Rivendell theme has the glory that a lot of other Elvish themes lack. There is a sense of greatness. You know, when you listen to the Lothlorien theme, it's peaceful, it's quiet, and it's also, there is a melancholy to it. Whereas the Rivendell theme is grand, and the Second Age is a kind of Elvish Renaissance. There is this is a new Elvish civilization. There is a new High King, etc. So this one could be used, in my opinion. It could be very.
And as we know that during the Second Age, we're going to see the elves in their prime. I know Ken often references this is like the prime of elves in basically the Second Age, even because in the Third Age they're less in their prime, however best way to put it. But still, do you think, for example, we've talked a lot about the elven themes and dwarven themes, but I'd like to move it on to the themes of men, and specifically going back to Numenor. So I'm talking to you. I know we could reuse from the movies. You just had the Gondor theme. Do you think that could be used a bit with the Numenorians?
It's possible. I think maybe some of them we could use, or we could take elements from those songs at the very least. I think that would make a lot of sense because, as we all know, Gondor and Numenor are very closely related. So I think that would make a lot of sense. But, you know, just like using the Rohan theme for another race, it just wouldn't quite make sense. But since Gondor and Numenor is so closely related, they probably will.
Yeah, I would say no. That would be my opinion on that. Just because with like the Elven, we do have a lot of epic stuff that has already been made. I feel like with Numenor, they actually have this opportunity to create something entirely different, something very new. I think we might see the same sort of styles, like, you know how the Riders of Rohan is a lot rougher and a lot more like wooden, I guess you could say, than the Elvish tunes. And the same with Gondor as well. There's a lot more what are they called, like trumpets, and yes, more brass. And I think they're going to use that, but I think also they could potentially be using more, perhaps like Middle Eastern sort of music, a little bit more exotic sounds to it. And I think they have so much opportunity here to get creative with the music of Numenor, which I feel like should be equally as epic as the Elvish, but different. So I feel like they shouldn't redo the Gondor one, because it feels like you're going back, like you're going backwards to go forwards in a way. So this is the great grand age of men, and when we get to Gondor in the Lord of the Rings, it's basically the men have been a little bit not so good for a while, so I feel like it should be more epic. Yeah.
Something I remember is in the Moria song, they took a little bit of it, like around the 2-minute mark or something, and then they turned that into the Thorin theme song. So I think you're right, they're definitely not going to use the same song, but I think they definitely will use elements of it, at least in my opinion. Especially when some of the Númenóreans establish havens in Middle-earth and something like that. I think we will definitely see elements of that song, but you're right, probably not the exact same song.
Yeah, it's the nature of, like I said, it's all the themes. They kind of exist in like families of themes, and so all the human themes, all the themes for mankind, have a certain style of music to them.
Except for Rohan, in my opinion. I think that's very different. What is it, like a violin, I guess?
Yeah, Rohan is predominantly violins, yeah. I think with Númenor, just to bring us back to Númenor for a second, I think we've got in Númenor is we've got a civil war, so we're going to have two different cultures clashing. We're going to have the faithful theme, or group of themes, let's say, versus the Kingsmen. So I think you've got an opportunity to do some interesting stuff there. So I wouldn't want, just a copy and paste job done of the Gondor theme from the movies. I think that would be wasteful. But we could take some musical cues from that and maybe use that kind of palette. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And one thing, it's interesting how they will approach it with the theme for the men theme, because I wouldn't mind maybe little hints, but as Nikki really well put it, you're going, I think on the lines of you're going backwards to go forwards again. And I think that is really well applied. That's a really well applied quote to the current situation. But with TV shows, you start at the beginning, then you of course go to the end. We know currently it is 5 seasons, so there's going to be a progression. And maybe we know from the synopsis that I believe the quote is, quote, in a relative time of peace, which means the soundtrack maybe might be more buoyant and more maybe upbeat and more happy. But then as this is before the shadow returns, but when we progress through the show, we might see a tone shift, and the theme might sound a bit different. So yeah, what do you guys think, maybe seeing that progression throughout the show, and do you think how that could work?
Strictly technically speaking, there is a kind of second age sound in the Howard Shore score. He has his separate sounds for the different cultures, but he also has sounds for the different ages. There's a third age sound, which is the sound we know. There's a fourth age sound, which is more late romantic type of music. But there is also a second relies more on chromaticism, means it's using the black notes on the piano keys, and it has a bit more sometimes, which I've just been reminded of when Nikki was talking, uses more kind of exotic instruments, because there are a lot of exotic instruments in the score. And so yeah, absolutely, we're all talking about themes. There's also the subject of which new instrumental colors will we use, which new instruments will we, introduce into this, because there's already a lot. And that's an interesting question in and of itself.
Enzo, do you have any ideas?
No. We've already used percussions, brasses, strings.
There's other stuff, like he used Indonesian gamelan, which is kind of an array of gongs for Smaug. He used bagpipes for some of the dwarven material. There's obviously in flute in the Shire music. Rohan gets, you called it violins, but it's actually a Norwegian instrument. It's called a hardanger fiddle, which has strings underneath the strings that you play. It's a huge variety of instruments. There's, I think, didgeridoos, under the Gundabad music.
Didgeridoos for the Druadan.
Gundabad has 20 didgeridoos playing along with the score.
Amazes me how you know all these specific things. Again, it really does. And it just makes me laugh. It just that you got such excellent knowledge on it. But as we move on now, one thing that I think you literally mentioned at the end was the Hobbit theme. And TalkingTube, I know you have some strong opinions on this. Do you think we could see the concerning Hobbits, or maybe a few of the Hobbit themes in the show?
No, I don't think so. As much as it would be cool, it would be really weird and kind of anticlimactic unless maybe they threw it into the end credits, because, you know, whenever you hear that song, even someone who's not very familiar with the movies, they're going to know it's all about the Hobbit. So let's just say they, I don't know, show Aldarion and Durindus, and at some time when they come together, or Aldarion returns, they play the concerning Hobbit song. It would be really, really weird, unless they sort of remixed the books and made them both Hobbits or something weird like that. I just don't think it would fit, because there aren't Hobbits in the Second Age at all.
Yeah, and that is correct. Obviously, Geekdom, Dan, what do you think? Would you like to see some Hobbit themes being reprised?
Not especially, no. As everybody said, we don't expect to see hobbits. We shouldn't see hobbits. I wouldn't like to say I'd be disappointed if we saw hobbits in this show, but it wouldn't be appropriate in the Second Age. Unless we have some sort of weird flash forward sequence, or the show in a couple of seasons' time ends up in the Third Age and then we get hobbits. Not that we think that's likely at the moment, but no, I don't think so. It's not my favourite part of the original soundtrack either, from the trilogy, the Hobbit stuff. I mean, it's appropriate, but it's not my favourite part.
Yeah, I agree with you. First of all, like, that is one of the most distinct and relatable songs on the Fellowship album, and on all of the Lord of the Rings albums. It is the one that you recognize the most, as in, oh yeah, that's the Hobbits. And I think, yes, please use the instruments, but use them in a different way. You can create new songs with the same instruments, and maybe some of the melodies, but not all of them. You really, for an entire species that is not meant to be in the Second Age at all, really feels like the wrong music to use. And if they're using it, I would sort of feel like they're just using it because it's recognizable through the Lord of the Rings, and it wouldn't make any sense. I would be fine with the Elvish tunes, I'd be fine with the Dwarven tunes, all of that, but not so much for the characters and species that aren't going to be in the show. No.
Something I think that is very interesting to think about is whether or not there is a precedent for reusing songs from the Lord of the Rings trilogy to the Hobbit trilogy, aside from the Hobbit songs, because those would probably not fit very well in this TV show. I hear that the Galadriel and Lothlorien songs are reused, and I'm sure there are some others, and of course there are some songs like the Khazad-dûm theme, where the Howard Shore took a little bit of the song and turned it into its own song, sort of took the tune from it. So I think there is definitely a good chance that we'll see, some of the themes taken and some of the, I guess, the language, as Hin put it. But we might also see a couple of the exact same songs taken from The Lord of the Rings, or probably not The Hobbit, because they would actually be very literally applicable. Not like the Gondor song to Numenor, but more like the, I don't know, let's just say there was a Gandalf theme to the Gandalf theme in the Second Age. But of course, Gandalf was in the Second Age. That's just an example. Or I guess if there's an Istari theme song, then they could apply that to the wizards, assuming they will be in there.
Yeah, there is an Istari theme. So yeah, there's a lot of themes that if they want, they can use. There is an Istari theme. There's there are lots of little things that would be very, very relevant. There is stuff like there is a diminishment of the elf theme, very relevant to the subject matter of the show. The Ring of Power has a theme, a couple of them actually. It's very relevant. Mordor has a ton of material that's relevant. Sauron has a theme. There's all sorts of themes that talk about, the the kind of there's a fall of men theme. All sorts of stuff like that. And so yeah, there's a ton of stuff to use.
Frankly, I oppose the use of the diminishment of the elves. It's according to what people say, the show will start from the beginning of Numenor, probably the Aldari and Erendius, and it will goes on until the War of Elves and Sauron. And until this point, there is no reason for having the diminishment of the elves. The diminishment starts after that, when people start migrating to the west. And even at that point, we still have Galadriel turning Lorinand into Lothlorien, we have Rivendell being built, we have Numenor starting settling Middle-earth. So I don't think it's in point or relevant to the series themes and to the setting they are adapting. It would be like, I don't know, like using the shower team for the War of Wrath.
Bit extreme.
Yeah. Back to what Ren was saying. With television shows and soundtracks, there are a few different ways you can go about creating recognizability. And one of those ways is to create songs and tunes both for specific places and characters. So, and also bands of characters like the Fellowship of the Ring. Like, I'm sure we'll see not fellowships, but we'll see groups of people coming together and making things work in this show too, whether they are groups of elves, groups of men, a combination, groups of elves and dwarves. We'll see all of these things. And if there is a group of people that we'll see more often, they could get not necessarily their own theme, as in that will play every time, but maybe a variation of it will play every time, an epic scene, or you'll see bits and pieces of it. The other way is feelings. So when they want you to feel something, so they'll have like the theme song of the actual show that will play in different moods and in different feelings and different places to give you the vibe of what is going on. And also through seasons, of course, they change. And as things get darker and more intense, of course, they change. So there are many different ways they can go about it. And I'm very excited to see it, because music, even though we don't really think about it, is such a big part of creating how you feel when you watch something. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
I think you've summed that up beautifully, and especially going back to it is themes again. And Voice of Geekdom, aka Dan, what theme are you most hoping to see in the show, or returning theme from the movies into the show?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of talk recently about the title of the show. Elijah Wood's comments have come up again, have resurfaced, and he's been talking about the title of the show and how it's not The Lord of the Rings. And the counter argument to that, of course, is that probably the main protagonist of this show ought to be Sauron, aka Anatar. So what I would like to see, and I'm actually particularly kind of not just hoping to see this, but it's almost a requirement for me, is a variation of the Sauron theme that we hear played in Mordor a lot in the movies. So I'm talking about that theme that plays when we see Barad-dûr. At the beginning of the movies, we hear it a lot when we flash to Barad-dûr and we get the scene of Gollum's torture, etc. When we see the Nazgul leave at the first, we hear that strong, loud theme. I would like to hear a variation of that theme built around the character of Anatar. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So not the exact same, not a copy and paste job of the movies, but just something that's recognizable, that is something new but related.
Yeah, I agree with you. But I kind of feel like we should see a development of it, because Anatar in the beginning, of course, he's always dangerous, but in the beginning he is very deceitful and beautiful and more of a alluring sort of character, and then he gradually becomes more evil. So I
Yeah,
would
when
love
I say
to
a variation, I mean like a softer version of that,
yeah,
which
100%.
would work with that seductive character that we all want to see, I think.
Yeah, and then
Sure.
gradually see it increase
Sure.
when you see like the men falling under his spell and all of that sort of stuff. I would love to see that.
So when I say it's a requirement, I mean that element of changing that theme to fit the different character that he is at this point in the histories.
There's such a theme. I was thinking about this previously. Howard wrote a Necromancer theme, which he basically
Yes.
took the Sauron theme and he kind of bent the end of it so it doesn't sound as menacing, and he usually plays it on like oboe or cornglaze instead of the rieta that it usually uses, so it's not as aggressive a sound. And that could be used really well for two reasons. One, it's not nearly as menacing. It has almost a kind of seductive or mysterious quality to it. And also, it was decided in the movie, in the mixing of the movie, that it was still too much of a giveaway, so they usually muted it out. So it's close enough, but it's not so recognizable. Most casual fans will go, Sauron. So I think that could work quite well.
Maybe another interesting one
That
is
would
if
still,
yeah, go on, Zobad.
yes, that would still be, that would give probably people who don't know the real story, should give them what to say, should give them a hint, a golden hint to know if he's Sauron or not, because we know that Anatar is Sauron, but people will go there. There will be people who want to read the books, will try to stay spoilerless, and in my opinion, it all depends on whether Anatar's real identity is a mystery or not. That's
Yeah, that's a really good talking point. Do you guys think maybe with Anatar there'll be a new theme for him because maybe Amazon don't want to give it away? Here's any ideas on that?
Maybe, like I said, they took the Necromancer theme out of The Hobbit because they thought it might give away that the Necromancer is Sauron for people who hadn't read this. So it's a thing. And I don't know, part of the issue is, a big question is, if they do get Howard Shore on board, will he compose new themes that then another composer could potentially use? Which is basically giving it the treatment that John Williams did to Solo. Solo was composed by, oh god, I forget his name, John... How to Train a Dragon. John Powell. And but John Williams he actually wrote two young Han Solo themes, and actually recorded them for Powell to then use. So Howard could do that sort of thing. He could write a couple of themes, orchestrate them, then let the composer of the show do his thing with them.
So you're saying maybe on a consulting basis. So Gallifreyan, would you like to see Howard Shore more of a consulting basis rather than being fully involved? Because that's a midway between you want fresh new stuff and have some reprisals of some of the older themes.
I definitely do think that they should be reusing just bits and pieces of the older songs, and if they need to get Howard Shore on board to accomplish that, I think totally. But at that point, I don't know why they wouldn't go ahead and just hire him to actually compose the songs, unless he's retired or just doesn't want to do it. But I think the more Howard Shore involvement we get, the better. I'm sure there are plenty of other very, very talented composers, but Howard Shore is pretty unique, especially to this trilogy, these two trilogies, and hopefully soon the TV show.
Indeed, and of course, until we get some official news, we're just going to have to. Sorry, voice back. We're just going to have to wait and see what if he will be involved or not. And just to maybe, if anyone has any questions, Dan.
Yeah, so here's a question for everybody, and I'll put it first to you, Harry, but we'll open up to the panel if we could. We've talked a lot about Howard Shaw being involved, and I certainly agree with Gallifreyan that the more involvement that we get from him, the better. I think I've been pretty clear on that. But if we don't get him, who else would be acceptable, or who could do it? Who do we think would be good?
That's a very good question, and I know when people, the first thing I think a lot of people went to and say if there's no Howard Shaw was, I forgot the Game of Thrones name is Ramin Djawadi. I think I'll probably butcher that.
Ramin Djawadi.
Yeah, but the problem is he is now on the Game of Thrones prequel, so that rules him out. And I think it was off the top of my head, was it a few years ago, was it the Skyrim composer or one of the composers for one of the games expressed his involvement, and look, what was his name again, Hen?
I have to check. I have no idea.
Yeah, I think it was. Here you go.
Soul?
Yeah, that was him. He's a game composer, but he also expressed interest in the show, and I think he was actually in one of the front lines for the show until I think he had some Hollywood scandal, as I'll put it, as a lot of the people in Hollywood and stuff like that currently have. So I doubt we'll be seeing him, but really, I wouldn't mind anyone, to be honest, who maybe has at least had some experience in that field. I don't have any names at the top of my head. Does anybody else have any names? Nikki?
Yeah, I actually, there are many amazing composers out there. I mean, there are so many that can carry that torch onwards. One particular one that comes to mind for me, which is very different, I guess, and I don't think anyone else would come up with this. But if you've ever played Ori and the Blind Forest or Ori and the Will of the Wisp, the composer Gareth Cocker, Cooker, or however you say his surname, he is actually really, really talented, and the songs that he has made for this game are so out of this world beautiful and fits the game so well that I think he could potentially be a good candidate. There are of course all the big ones, like I mean, you have like John Williams, you have all of these very well established composers, but he's one of those that I would actually like to see in the running for it.
And they could also, in addition to John Williams, who I think would be a pretty good idea to use, he's pretty talented, it seems. He scored Star Wars and I think a couple of other big ones as well. And there's also, I don't know if I'm saying this right, Klaus Badelt or something like that. He composed the Pirates of the Caribbean. And I don't remember too well the songs in that. I remember the main theme song, but they all seemed pretty well made, so I think he would be a good composer to get on. And there's plenty of other really big composers that they might try to use, and really we don't know, but any of them would be very, very good.
Yeah, and just going back to the question now, I'm not sure, I'll still expand the mix. Has anybody seen BBC Merlin? Anyone? Because
I've seen a bit of it.
Yeah, because I think, yeah, as it progresses, I think the soundtrack for that is really good. I believe the composer is Robert Lane, and I think Nikki a while back, I think I tweeted about it. I think he's really close to maybe Howard Shaw's closest I've heard in years to Howard Shaw. Then you showed me, I think, what was that the one you've mentioned as well? Forgotten, was the game one? Forgot what was it?
Oh yeah, that was him. Yeah, yep, that's the one I was just talking about.
Yeah, and I know Chen has some strong opinions. So, who would you not want to see?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Hans Zimmer, and there's a trend in music scoring in recent years that's been kind of championed by Zimmer. And he has a lot of kind of almost acolytes, lots of composers that kind of sound like him. Well, that rises to mind, where the style of the music is very percussive, kind of almost uses the orchestra like a drum, whereas the music of Howard Shore is much more lyrical, flowing, melodic. So that's not something that I'm very enthusiastic about.
Can I quickly say that I doubt Hans Zimmer will be any who will ever be watching this, or maybe someone from his team would be. But thank you for letting me use your work in the background music videos. I do not endorse what Hen is saying. Thank you for letting me use the background music in your videos. Oh, sorry, continue, Hen.
Background music.
Yeah, because I use
Okay.
Hans Zimmer's soundtrack in the background of most of my videos. So
Oh, really?
yeah, that's what I'm
Okay,
saying.
okay.
That's what I'm saying. I just want to say thank you, Tim.
Yeah,
I do not endorse any of your words.
And there's also like composers like Nicholas Hopper, Patrick Doyle, there were a lot of composers, not a lot, but there were quite a few composers on the Harry Potter. And that's also going back to what we talked about with reusing themes, but making them your own in a way. Harry Potter's soundtrack is very much Harry Potter, and when you go to Fantastical Beasts and Where to Find Them, it's very much Harry Potter still, but it's a different world and it's going backwards, so it's a little bit more old-fashioned in a way. These composers have mastered that thing of taking the themes that we already know and love and using them in a different way. So, yeah. I think they're quite talented, all of them.
Yeah, there's so many to choose from. And just moving on now, I normally ask these questions to Penguin, but talking to you are my culprit today. Just on a more lighter note, if you had to give, what type of theme would you give when you see the big and strong Russell Crowe on the screen and he's coming down the Númenórean steps? What theme would you give him?
I think an original song. I don't think you can give him the lesser theme song that we see in The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. That would feel weird. But I think it should have perhaps some notes or the same theme as that song or some of the other Gondorian songs, assuming he is going to be a Númenórean, which is very likely, because he's probably not going to be an elf, and maybe a dwarf.
Russell Crowe could be an elf. What are you on about?
I don't know. I just think he's a bit too old for it. He's
I don't know. Does he look like he is immortal? I don't think he does he?
Yeah.
He could be
He'd have to
He could be a
at
dwarf
least.
or a man, I think.
Yeah, more of a
Probably
dwarf than
he
an elf.
make a better dwarf than anything, I think.
Well, you forget they have
just because
special
of his
effects
build.
and VFX. They could
gonna have to spend
make
a
him
lot of
into
money on
Yeah,
basically
VFX,
but
anything
like
they want.
Legolas, they had a ton of FX on Legolas in The Hobbit, yet a ton of people complained about his appearance. Aside from the
Yeah.
eyes. I mean, the eyes were probably the biggest things that people hated, but he wasn't 18 or 22, I guess, anymore, so he just didn't look the same. He was like, I think 36, which there was surprisingly a huge difference between him at 36 as an elf versus at 22.
Yeah.
So I think having
He was
Russell
older
Crowe at like in his 50s would be a bit too much. Just like personally, I think Joseph Maul is too old to be Avatar.
Indeed. And of course, I would like to back to Nikki. You have to spend a lot of money on VFX to put down Russell Crowe to look like an elf. I'm just saying, because you've got a picture on screen right now. But actually, I'm gonna firstly go to Enzo, then I'm gonna go to Voice of Geekdom. But I haven't heard your guys' opinions on Russell Crowe in the show. Of course, this is just a rumor at the time. Is it likely? No, we don't know. But firstly, starting off with Enzo, would you like to see him in the show?
Definitely. He's a great actor, and it would make a good addition to the show. But as an elf, I don't know. Apart from Círdan, there isn't many elves with beards. As for dwarves, no, he doesn't. He doesn't look like a dwarf. I would have him as a Númenórean, King Tar-Palantir or Atanamir, or one of the good kings, not the bad one.
What about you, Voice of Geekdom?
I think it depends what they cast him as. As we said before, he's definitely no elf, not nowadays, and not unless they spend a lot of budget on CGI. He's no elf. I could definitely see him as during the third. I think that could work. And looking at the picture that you've just posted, I think maybe he's got the physique for it.
That'll be on screen as well.
Not to be mean, but, but he looks like a dwarf in that photo. How tall is he? I know they can obviously use camera trickery to mess around with that.
Like 5 foot, 5 foot something.
You mean like high 5 foot? Obviously, I'm assuming that he's not 5'2", is he?
Quite tall,
Yeah, I
but
think like 5'10",
always they.
right?
I would guess 5'9", 5'10", but you never know until you
we
see
use
somebody in
meters,
person.
so we have 182 meters.
Okay.
So yeah, would be 5'10" or something like that. Yeah.
If he was
Maybe a
Scottish,
little
American,
more.
that makes almost no sense to me at all. But
see, that's the perfect
Ah,
having people
yeah.
so called different parts of the world. And I would just like to say that with Russell Crowe, you probably heard before, I just don't really see where he fits. I think Dan put a good point about having him maybe during the third. That would be quite interesting. But except from that, really, I don't really see him else. But do you think, I think someone else referenced it earlier about character-related themes. Do you think, we haven't really touched upon Elrond yet, do you think Amazon will use the Rivendell theme with Elrond?
Maybe. I think they might use them subtly, but it really depends on what characters they're actually planning on following, like for each season, and what characters they will focus on. I mean, in Game of Thrones, the characters didn't necessarily have one particular theme. It was more like the different areas of the map had different themes. Like the north had one. They would have. It would be recognizable, but not specific to one character. So I think it would be possible.
It would just be interesting because I think I spoke to Enzo earlier about having a Gil-galad theme, and you did say that you would like to have. You wanted it to be more a Rivendell theme? Would you think that would work for Gil-galad, having that Rivendell theme?
For Gil-galad, I don't know. I said for Mithland. For the city of Mithland, having it could work very well. It has the uplifting sense and the greatness. But for Gil-galad, I would have a new theme for him in particular, because the Rivendell theme is still associated with Elrond a little too much for him.
I feel like a lot of brass for Gil-galad. I feel like elven version of brass. Like he's quite powerful. So I can picture that.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah,
have. Yeah, go on.
So I just wanted to register my agreement with that, because he should be the most powerful character on the good guy side, really, shouldn't he? He's the badass who ends up actually kicking Sauron's ass at the end of the second age, isn't he? So definitely, I want to see some powerful themes come through with him. We don't know too much about his personality. I did a podcast about him on a friend's channel a while back, and we came to the conclusion that we didn't know much about what he was like as a person, other than that he was a badass that you don't want to mess with. So,
Russell Crowe's
yes.
Gil-galad?
Maybe
Okay.
like Russell Crowe in his like late 20s, yes, but not now, I don't think.
And it's something I just want to throw out there. It's not that on topic with the theme of songs for this podcast, but the end of the series, we may very well see Sauron's downfall when he is killed by Gil-galad and Elendil, rather than Isildur in the Fellowship of the Ring movie. They show a flashback, and it's Isildur who kills Sauron. So we may very well see a big contradiction there, which would be really weird for people who haven't read the books.
Yeah.
I
And-
prefer them to be true to the books, not the movies, when it comes to like the actual storyline of things.
Yeah, it would just be such a huge, glaring contradiction, which would be pretty awkward, especially
we
if
are
it's
on
going
this-
to be in continuity with the songs and with the location and aesthetics like that.
Since we are on the topic of the War of Last Alliance, do you think we will see the armor of Sauron, the iconic one, which appears, which figures in the intro, you know, with the spikes and the hair and the mace, etc.
I think so. I like it.
Yeah, because it's at this point, I think it's as iconic as the eyeball.
Yeah, I like that armor. I'd love to see it.
And I think Tolkien Tube referenced quite a good thing that I'm not sure if it's intention or not, but in the end of Return of the King, Sauron's downfall, and the music then when the ring is destroyed, when he is killed at the end of season 5, if that is the case, should Amazon use the same theme? I think that'd be really interesting. What's everyone's opinions?
Wow, that's a Fourth Age theme, though. It has the sound of the Fourth Age, and it's technically the theme. How it does there is it takes the History of the Ring theme, the sound, the one at the title, and he takes it, he kind of switches it to the major mode. That's what he does. I don't know if it's appropriate. Maybe, maybe not. No.
If you're speaking about the one when the tower falls, I would say no, because at the end of the Lord of the Rings, the victory is complete, and we have truly achieved total the victory against Sauron. But at the end of the Second Age, it's more of a kind of, I don't know,
Victory.
War of Wrath. Yes, it was a victory, but we lost Gil-galad, we lost Elendil, and evil wasn't truly destroyed, as we all know, because Isildur didn't destroy the ring. So I would have a more bitter theme.
Interesting.
That's my opinion.
Yeah. And I just think one thing we've done in today's podcast is talk about what we think Amazon should do, what we want Amazon to do. But in reality, what do you guys think Amazon will do? Starting off with Voice of Geekdom. I think should we go up across the chat, so we start with Voice of Geekdom, then we'll go to Nikki and so on. Do you think would Amazon want to go back and potentially use maybe the Hobbit theme or stuff like that, just for maybe marketing purposes and stuff like that?
I think so. I think they'd be smart to use some recognizable notes. I think they'd be slightly foolish to, just copy and paste whole songs from the soundtrack, from Howard Shore's original work on the soundtrack. But I think they'd be foolish not to try and tie it in with that in a recognizable way. It's a fine line, really, is my answer.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be a smart move on their behalf. The films already have so much recognition in them, so many fans that just love them. So using some of the music to make it more recognizable and relatable is a good, smart move. But I think they have to use it the right way, because using the theme of the Hobbits just because it's from the Lord of the Rings movies is wrong, but using aspects of Lothlorien or Khazad-dûm or similar is a good way to do it. Yeah, there is a right and a wrong way to do it, and I believe that they will pick the right one.
Yeah, that seems like to be the similar theme. What about you, Enzo?
Well, if they got their hands on Howard Shore, they need to use the themes of Howard Shore. Even if they got him to compose new things, they will reuse other themes. That would be a waste not to do so. Even though I'm partially against it, I'm pretty sure they would. We will end up with the running themes like Lothlorien, the beginning of Balin's Tomb, and the Ring at some point.
Yep. What about you, Tolkien Tube?
I definitely think they will have some sense of continuity when it comes to songs, because all the evidence we have thus far points to continuity in other areas and other aspects of the show. And I'd also like to put it out there that the composer of Middle-earth Shadow of War and Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor games, Gary Scheinman, might also be the choice to compose the soundtrack for the series. It's not very likely, but he has dabbled in the Lord of the Rings songs, so that's another possibility. Probably more possible than some of the other composers, but again, not very likely. But yeah, I think, back to the original topic, I definitely think that they will have some similar songs, but they probably won't take the songs verbatim and put them in the show, except for maybe a couple that are really, really specifically related to what's being shown in the TV series. Because it would, of course, be weird if they, I don't know, use the Hobbit theme song or the Gondor or the Rohan song on, let's just say, the Men in Middle-earth. It just wouldn't quite be right. And that's really all that I think, in conclusion.
Very well said. And finally, Chen.
Yeah, I just want to point out one small thing beforehand, which is that sometimes a composer will come to a moment in the drama where he's like, I'll use this theme, even though it doesn't really make sense, but it just sounds right. So occasionally that sort of thing does happen. You know, Obi-Wan Kenobi dies, we hear Leia's theme, that sort of thing. Happens all the time. So occasionally that sort of thing, if it happens very, very few times, I wouldn't mind that. You just get a theme that sounds right, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I think they should stick to Howard Shore's themes and hopefully engage him in writing a couple of new themes, orchestrate them, like an Region theme perhaps, that sort of thing, and just go with that and use his kind of themes and his instrumentation as well. Use of chorus, you know, his exotic instruments, not gamelan, but I don't know, the sarangi which he uses for Lothlorien. Be quite cool.
Mm-hmm. And just for the final discussion, main discussion, is we have talked about Dwarven themes, we have talked about the Numenorian themes, we have talked about the Linden and the Elven themes, but one thing that we haven't talked about is we know we're going to see it is the far reaches of the map and potentially Umbar and Harad. So Nikki, what do you think on that? We know in the movies around in the third books there were some more Eastern themes, but do you think Amazon should go? How do you think Amazon should take it on?
I really like the Eastern themes. I reckon they could definitely use them. It really depends on, like, you've got to look at the aesthetic, like the look of what they're creating as well. The music has to match what they're making. If they're making a Norse sort of Nordic looking Numenor that looks like, you know, Valhalla or something like that, it would maybe be weird to use Middle Eastern music to go along with it. But I kind of feel like there's definitely a lot of potential there, and there are certain parts of the map that they haven't really talked about, but they are present in the pictures that Amazon have of this map that they're going to be using. So I think they're definitely, they should expand on that. I think make it more exotic. I mean, there are more parts of the world than just what we see. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that was very well said. And anybody have any other ideas about that?
Like I said, scores use a ton of exotic instruments, and I would definitely love to hear some more new exotic instrumentation. Sure, absolutely.
Great. And now just to wrap up today's podcast, I'm going to go from bottom to top. Again, starting with Voice of Geekdom, aka Dan. And the question for everyone is going to be, if you could only choose one theme from the movies that you can reuse in the show appropriately, which one would it be? I know I put you on the spot a bit, Voice Geekdom as your first, but go ahead.
I think you already asked me this, didn't you? I said the Sauron theme earlier on. Well, I talked about using a variation of that theme for Anatar, a more subtle, a more toned down and softer version of the Sauron theme that we hear. Sort of like how Ken was saying earlier on about how that was used for the Necromancer stuff in The Hobbit. Yeah. So I think I already gave that answer earlier on in a way.
My bad. And then off on to Nikki next.
I reckon like the songs that they used in Rivendell or Lothlorien, like Many Meetings or the song themed Lothlorien, could be absolutely perfect. The Lament of Gandalf, so much because we know what it says, but that is of course a part of the Lothlorien theme. So maybe not that aspect of it, but the rest of it.
Great. I'm Zobud.
Reorchestrated Balin's Tomb for Moria.
Yeah, that is one of the prominent ones, yeah. Anything else you want to say?
No.
Okay, then on to Talking Tube.
I guess just bits and pieces of most of the songs. If they were going to take one song and put it into the TV show without, sort of really making a new song out of it, I guess maybe one or two of the Nazgul or Sauron themes, if indeed we'll see them in heavy doses, or Nikki, if it was you who said the Rivendell, we could see that song or hear that song. And there are a couple of others, but I think more than we'll see songs copy and pasted into the new TV show, we'll see songs that are sort of remade and redone.
Exactly. And finally, Chen.
Any one theme specific, I would think it's actually the history of the ring theme. The ring theme, basically. It's wonderful and it's very, very relevant and very important. So I think that would be the one.
Yep, and that's about it. And just one final question, Dan. Would you like to see a sexy Sauron theme?
A sexy Sauron theme.
Yeah,
so what does that mean? I mean, I want to see an attractive Sauron. I think.
Yeah, seducing the elves, of course.
But do I want the music to sound like sort of like 80s porn music or something?
Whatever you choose.
No, I don't know if there should be a specific sexy theme, but there should be. It should sound seductive. I mean, he should be seductive, and the music should support that. But it's seductive in the sense of, charismatic and having a force of character, not necessarily being just gorgeous. But I think probably the casting should, lean towards being an attractive actor. But as far as the music goes, I think that should support that kind of feeling.
Yeah. And you referenced gorgeous, and on screen right now is a picture of Russell Crowe with a woman with his. I just won't describe it anymore. So I think that's the gorgeous that we are looking for. But I think that's about it for today's podcast. I want to firstly thank you, Chen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Talking Tube.
Yeah, it's great to be on here, and thank you for inviting me on for another podcast. It was a whole lot of fun. And be sure to check my YouTube channel out, probably in the description, and subscribe here, of course.
Always in the description, my friend. Yep, all his links will be down there. Also, thank you again, second time for I'm Zobud. Thank you for coming on, my friend.
You're welcome.
Thank you, always wonderful Nikki.
Namarie.
And thank you, of course, to our special guest, this video / podcast, Dan, aka Voice of Geekdom.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a really interesting discussion. Nikki's just stolen my Elvish. I was going to say Namarie as well, but I'll say it again, Namarie.
Oh yeah, Namarie. Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a really interesting discussion. I'll be down in the comments at the video when the video comes out, whenever that will be. And my links will be in the description, I'm sure. So check out my stuff.
Yep,
but, yeah, thank you.
No problem, and everyone's links from here will be in the description below. And to the viewers at home, thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoyed. But until the next podcast, my friends, from everyone here, goodbye.